Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Hello, SBI TV subscribers. My name is Ryan Tognazzini. I'm a principal with SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. With me today is my pal Scott Brewer, who's a partner with SBI. And on this show, we discuss sales and marketing best practices for viewers just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. How you doing today, Gru?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Doing great. All right, so on today's show, we are discussing your value proposition. Specifically, do you have one, and do the people in your organization actually know what it is?
Yeah. So if you're a CEO or a marketing leader, you're probably saying to yourself, of course we have a value proposition. The question is that value proposition being articulated correctly at the moment of the truth in front of the customer? So let's stress test the assumption that maybe it is.
Yeah, so first, let's actually define value proposition for our audience. So this may be a little bit academic, but bear with me. So a value proposition really is a business or marketing statement that summarizes why a consumer should buy or use your product or service. And you can learn more about this actually in our Make Your Number workbook in 2016 on page 98 under the product strategy section, which is step 4, launch.
Yeah, one thing to point out here to the audience, Togs, is the difference between a value proposition and a positioning statement. So a value proposition is the value your solution brings to your customers. And a positioning statement is how you position your company as opposed to other competitors in the market. So why us versus them?
So who actually typically owns this?
Typically product marketing. They should be working with the product managers to understand the problems that it solves, and therefore the value that your product brings to the customers, which then gets translated into that value proposition.
Yeah, so if you're an executive watching this, I mean, you may be thinking, I've got a great value proposition. I'm super clear on what it is and the value that we bring to our customers. And this may be true, but one thing we've seen is that clarity might actually stop with you. But here's a little test that you can perform to see how well this is ingrained in your organization. As you're walking the halls today or tomorrow or whenever you're in your office next, ask a few employees to recite your value proposition to you and just say, hey, tell me what our value proposition is, and ask people from different departments. I mean, marketing, product, sales, HR, and just see what they have to say.
Yep. You may be surprised that people struggle to clearly articulate this. So for example, I've worked with clients before where they have a documented value proposition, right? It's written down somewhere in a PowerPoint deck. It seems great. Then when I go out in the field with the team and they get in front of a customer, they start talking about their product in a completely different way, right? And that value isn't translated to the customer.
Yeah, and we would call this message distortion, which is essentially the dilution of the message if you think about it going down the hierarchy of your organization. So it's crystal clear at the top, and by the time it gets down to the bottom, it's completely diluted and isn't at all what you initially intended.
Right, it's like a game of telephone if you remember that. By the time it gets to the last person on the chain, the original message is lost, or even worse, it could be said completely incorrectly, right? So if your sales force isn't sure of the value that they're providing to customers, making your number is virtually impossible. Even if you have one, if nobody knows how to articulate it, it might as well not exist. If you get this wrong, you're going to miss your number.
So you got my attention. Tie this to how not having a value proposition in the field is going to cause me to miss my number if I'm a sales leader.
Yeah, because buyers have changed. With upwards of 70% of the customer buyer process done without a sales rep present, this means your customer is leveraging things like the internet to learn about what you do and how you can solve their problem. So they're going to be looking at your content, and if there's not a clear message between content, what the rep is saying, everything they look at, you're not going to get the right message across to your customer.
So making sure that the value proposition in your message comes through in your content is critical. So I guess you think about that 70% buying process piece. I mean, someone's going to be on your website. Your rep isn't even in the room.
Yeah.
And they're going to be reading content, and they want to try and understand how your solution might actually solve the problem that they have. And if it's absent, or even worse, if you've got a bunch of product features and specs that you're touting on your website, I mean, ultimately, you're going to lose the audience before you even knew you had them.
Yeah, and you don't have that much time with that audience online, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to open up a piece of content, and they can't, if they don't understand what you do and why it's important to them very quickly, they're not going to keep reading.
All right, so what are some things that I should look for to determine if this might be a problem in my organization beyond the sniff test of asking people if they know it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that you can look for. Are you generating a lot of traffic on your site for particular products, but not many leads? This could mean people are finding you while looking to solve their particular problem, but they bail out because your message doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah, or maybe you're not getting any traffic at all, which is even worse, right? Which is suggesting that you have issues to even get found to begin with.
Yeah, true. So do you have a clear understanding of what people are searching for to solve their problems? And is it connected to things like your SEO strategy? So when they search, you show up in the results.
Yeah, so I mean, just consider this, right? Your product team has just spent a bunch of money to bring a new product to the market, and nobody's interested. So in our Make Your Number research, we found that the typical B2B company spends about 35% of revenues on product, marketing, and sales expenses. And so depending on your organization, you might spend a little bit more than that. You might spend a little bit less and in each of these some of these categories. But I mean, to emphasize the point, I mean, it's a big number. And something as simple as a value proposition can cost a company millions of dollars if a failed product launch happens and the value proposition is not clear and the team misses the number.
Yeah, so imagine if you're a $1 billion company, Ryan, and your products team spends about $30 million building a new product in that first year, and you don't get that money back. You spent $30 million in sunk costs that never got returned because you didn't have a good value proposition to bring to the market to sell that new product. We see it all the time.
Yeah. And all this goes back to, missing the message to your customers. They either didn't find you or they found you and they weren't interested. So this cascades, down through the organization, and ultimately it ends up impacting everybody.
Yeah. The product spent the money and they got no return. Marketing is spending the money on the wrong message and that nobody shows up to buy the product, right? Sales misses the number and people miss their bonuses or lose their job. It's a death spiral of badness, right?
Nice. A death spiral of badness. Good one. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at how market research might help you solve the problem for your value proposition challenges. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back to the show. Today we're discussing value propositions and how it can impact your ability to make your number. So let's turn our attention to the subject of market research. So Scott, can you walk the audience briefly through our definition of market research, which is on page 38 of our How to Make Your Number in 2016 workbook?
Yeah,
Take a minute and go through that.
I'm going to open up the workbook here and just go through these quickly, and then we'll explain them in more detail. So there's 4 phases to market research. The first one is market segmentation. So market segmentation is dividing the broad target market into subsets of buyers who have common needs, priorities, and solution options. The next is account segmentation. Can you define that for our audience, Ryan?
Yeah, so I mean, this is all about understanding which accounts in your market are going to generate the most amount of revenue in the least amount of time for your sales force.
Yep. So the next one, the third one, is buyer segmentation. And this is all about understanding how the buyers in your accounts make purchasing decisions.
Yep. And lastly, you've got user segmentation, which is understanding the problems, the market problems that exist for the users of your solution. So Scott, how should we think about this in the context of a value proposition?
Yeah, when you start with broad markets, you're looking for people who have common needs and problems. When you understand this, you can create valuable solutions that will serve those markets effectively.
Yeah, versus taking a single product and selling it to everyone the same way. I mean, what you're likely to find here is that people in different markets can use your solution differently. Yeah. So the message that you convey to them actually matters here. Example here would be maybe a hospital has, different problems than a bank. And your solution might fill a need in different ways for both of them. But you need to be clear on how it does that and what value it creates for those individual segments.
Yeah. So this is where value prop becomes important. If I'm a hospital, why do I care? Or to your point, if I'm a bank, why do I care? So do you have clearly defined value propositions for each one of those scenarios?
Yeah, we see companies skip this step very often, and they end up really marginalizing their products that they develop. I mean, the products get built inward out without taking into account the markets that they're going to serve. And ultimately, this ties back to missing your number. So let's talk a little about the next area of market research, which is account segmentation. So how should I think about that with respect to how this factors into my value proposition?
Yeah, so once you've identified the markets you want to go after, you can then start to assign value to those customers at the account level. This is key. So this is account segmentation, which is determining which accounts will generate the most revenue in the least amount of time.
Yeah, and this is more than just figuring out how much potential spend sits inside my accounts. I mean, it also involves things like account scoring, which is understanding what constitutes an ideal customer for your solution. So the tie into value proposition here is if you understand which customer types are going to value your solution the most, you're able to prioritize those. And so now you've got a rep, who can focus on a specific set of accounts. I mean, look, ultimately a rep can only focus on so many accounts, right? So if I've got 400 accounts in my territory, there's no chance I'm going to be able to get to all those in the course of a year. So which ones are the best ones? And which ones give me the best chance to make my number next year based on who's going to find most value in those solutions.
Yeah, imagine you know what markets you want to go after and the solutions to offer, but you have no clue which customers might value your solution the most. If you've got 10,000 potential customers, account segmentation will help you figure out which accounts to pursue based on who is most likely to find your value proposition valuable.
Yep. All right, so now I've got a clear understanding of the markets and the customers, that I want to go after in those markets, and how they might value my solution. So I've gone from the entire universe of people who could potentially buy my customer to, a focused set of people I want to actually chase, who are going to derive the most value and give me the best chance to win. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss how understanding your buyers and users of products tie into your value proposition. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Welcome back to the show. In our last segment, we discussed the impact of market and account segmentation on your value proposition and how it ties into making your number. Let's now shift to buyer and user segmentation. Buyer segmentation is understanding how your buyers in your segment make purchasing decisions. What's important for our viewers to know about their buyers, Ryan?
Yeah, so first off, it's that they know them at all. This is a step that's astoundingly skipped all the time by companies. They don't take the time to understand how their buyers actually make a purchasing decision. They build things inward out and make guesses and don't really go out and do the primary research that's necessary to understand those things.
Yeah, we see this mistake all the time, right? Reps get trained all day on product features, but somehow they don't really get trained on how somebody makes a buying decision or how they buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So, if you're an executive listening to this and you're wondering if this is happening in your business, jump on a product demo with one of your reps and engineers and whoever else joins that call the next time one's taken place. And I'd be willing to make a guess that they spend very little time understanding the buyer and what their needs are and, tailoring their message to those items. And they pivot or shift right to, let me tell you all about us and let me tell you about how great this product is going to be for you.
Yeah, and our audience is probably wondering why their product gets commoditized. Well, this is where it happens, right? You're selling on a feature versus the value. When this happens, you're inviting the competition to show up and marginalize your product and price.
Yeah, so I think you got a recent example of this happening that maybe you can share.
Yeah, so I was on a sales call last week, and it was a newer account executive. So they brought the whole team with them. They called it a caterpillar call. There was like 5 different people and there were legs everywhere, right? And the sales engineers, overlays, all these people in the room. And what happened is they opened the call and said, "Here's the team." And it went straight to product and feature talk, right? So really what they did, instead of talking about the value of their solution, they started talking about feature function, and the deal was done.
Yeah, and so tying this back to, the buyer persona, I mean, they didn't know who was in the room, who was going to be in the room, what those people actually cared about. All they knew is that they had a great product and let's get in there and, bust out our shiny great product and show how well it works and how it's going to solve all the world's problems. But they didn't take into consideration really who's sitting in the room and ultimately why they're even going to care about making that purchase.
Yeah, and then, the AE brought in somebody, and that person, the sales engineer, wasn't educated on the value proposition. They didn't lead with that, right? So they went back to what they were comfortable with.
Got it. So a takeaway from this part of our segment, by the way, Caterpillar call. That's a new one for me. So when you think about this part of market research, buyer segmentation, which is the third step, or the third phase as you described, who owns this?
Yeah, typically product marketing would own this, with help from product management. And they should be conducting customer research to understand things like objectives, obstacles, what their key metrics are, what's important to them, where they look at content. This is how you start to understand the value proposition at the individual buyer level.
Yeah. And what happens here is this starts to get your sales team aligned and focused on, value versus those product features.
Yeah.
So, how many of you people watching this have had a car salesman jump all over you as soon as you walk in the dealership? You're early in your evaluation process. Maybe you like the new model that came out and you just want to show up and check it out, perhaps take it for a test drive. And the salesman walks up and he's asking you, how much can you afford? And, what's it going to take to get you into this car today? You're totally out of alignment with, with what that salesperson, he's closing you and you're just trying to understand, how this thing might help you.
Yeah, exactly. Kill me. I would rather buy online or not have to deal with those people and pay another $500. That's a good example, right? I would pay more money not to talk to that salesperson.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing about buyer personas. They don't care about your product. They really don't. And I know this is tough for maybe some product folks to hear out there, but at the end of the day, people care about themselves and they want to solve their own problems that help them do their job better. And, if that means buying your product, great. But in a lot of cases, if the pain of staying the same is less than the pain of making a change, you're never going to win. So being able to understand your buyers better than they understand themselves is really the key to knowing what value you can create for them and how to better execute on a sales campaign.
Let's conclude by discussing user segmentation. This might be the most important thing to consider. If you don't know how people use your product, why they value it, you'll have a hard time convincing buyers to make a purchasing decision at all.
Yeah, more and more purchases we're seeing are getting made via consensus and things like evaluation teams, proof of concepts, et cetera. So if the people using your product say it adds no value, to their workday, you're going to sell 0 units.
Yeah, exactly. You brought up proof of concepts. We're seeing a lot more of those. And this is all about the user. Does it work? Does it save them time? Do they like it? Is it a good user experience? If you haven't done the work to understand your users, chances will your success will plummet here.
Yeah. And so ultimately, if you can't create value for your user, it's a non-starter. A quick story just to bring this home about a client of ours. So they had a product team that built a new scanner that they were going to sell to some global logistics customers of theirs for scanning packages, et cetera. And they skipped this step of understanding user and conducting user research. And when the reps went out to introduce this new scanner to the customers, they quickly learned that it wasn't compatible with their systems. And so now you've got millions of sunk cost in developing a brand new product, and it failed because the largest global logistics customers that they had made up 70% of their revenue in that vertical, and nobody could buy the product. So a classic example of misalignment there. And the funny thing is, the reps actually knew it, but nobody went and asked them from the product team, hey, what do you think your customers will want? Or can we talk to some of your customers before we go off and build this? It was we'll build it and they will come approach, and it failed.
So that's a great example. What was the impact on the reps in that scenario? They brought it back to product and they didn't listen to them.
Yeah, so ultimately, now I'm a rep, I got a brand new product, and I'm getting a number to sell that product, and my biggest customer can't buy it. So, good luck making the number on that solution this year. So, yeah. Had to go find other ways to make the number, but it caused pain for the sales manager, the VP, right on up the stack.
Okay, let's bring it home. Here's a takeaway for our viewers. A lack of a comprehensive market research can cause a poor or missing value proposition. If you don't have this, missing your number and missing your product goals and potentially missing your bonus targets is a high probability.
Yeah, and so a key takeaway here is there are 4 phases there, and it's really all about doing all 4 of those things, not doing them in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to learn more about this, you can go to salesbenchmarkindex.com. Thanks for joining Scott and me today. We hope you've enjoyed watching us and picked up a few insights along the way. And if you enjoyed our show today, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV, or you can find us on our YouTube channel at SBI. We've got some great guests confirmed for future episodes that you probably won't want to miss. And until then, we wish you the best of luck as you try and make your number. So long.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.